I used to think love looked like patience, like waiting my turn, like biting my tongue when the spotlight always landed on someone else. Growing up, our family business wasn't just a store, it was a legacy. A small town hardware shop tucked on the corner of Maple and Third, passed down from my grandfather to my father. My mother kept the books, running the office with the quiet precision of a woman who had stopped expecting gratitude. And me, I stocked shelves, took inventory, memorized part numbers. I was invisible in the most useful way, but my brother Jake, he was the golden child. Jake was the charming one, loud, impulsive, messy. He didn't remember birthdays, but he remembered how to spin every mistake into a joke. When he got suspended in 10th grade, my father laughed. "Boys will be boys," he said, ruffling Jake's hair. When I made honor roll, they barely looked up from their coffee. "Well, of course she did," my mother had muttered. Emma always does. They called me dependable, quiet, strong. I didn't know back then that those words were just polite synonyms for forgettable. The time we were teenagers, it was always understood that Jake would take over the shop one day. I heard it in passing, at family dinners, after Sunday church, during client meetings. "Jake's learning the ropes," Dad would say proudly. I'd be in the background, balancing the checkbook or organizing invoices. No one ever said, "Emma's learning too," but I was. Every day, every dollar, every crisis. I was absorbing it all. Still, I believed them when they said, "Your time will come." I believed it because I needed to. After high school, Jake went off to college, some vague business program he never finished. I stayed. I managed inventory, restructured the accounting system, digitized our books. I never asked for recognition. I just wanted the work to speak for itself, but work doesn't speak when people refuse to listen. One summer afternoon, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. I wasn't eavesdropping, not on purpose. I'd come in to refill the paper tray in the printer, and they didn't see me. Dad was sipping his iced tea. "We'll transfer the shop to Jake in the next few years," he said, like it was already settled. "Emma?" Mom asked, her voice hesitant. "She's not cut out for leadership," he replied. "Too cautious. Too emotional. Jake has vision." I remember standing there frozen, like the floor had opened under my feet and I was falling, but no one noticed. Not even me at first. It was just one conversation, one moment. But it rearranged everything. I didn't confront them. I didn't cry. I just nodded to myself, printed the shipping label I came in for, and walked out. But from that moment on, something shifted. I stopped waiting for my time to come. Instead, I started planning for what I would do when it didn't. The news came on a Thursday like any other, morning coffee with too much sugar, quiet rain tapping against the office window, inventory spreadsheets open on my screen. My father walked in mid-morning, wearing a strange smile and holding a manila folder like it was something holy. "I've got some updates," he said. "Let's gather in the break room." Jake strolled in 5 minutes later, late as usual, smelling faintly of cologne and overconfidence. He tossed me a wink as he took a seat. I remember folding my hands on the table, still in my work apron, pencil stuck in my messy bun. I was the picture of diligence, of someone who thought she belonged there. Dad stood at the front of the room, clearing his throat. "I've decided it's time to retire," he said, voice warm. "It's been a long run, and I think it's time to pass the torch." I smiled, nervous, hopeful. This was it. And then he turned to Jake. "Congratulations, son," he said. "The business is officially yours." My smile didn't drop right away. It took a second, like my brain needed time to translate the words into betrayal. Jake grinned, slapped Dad's back, and laughed. Knew I had it in me. I looked at my father. Then my mother, who had just walked in holding cupcakes, as if this were a birthday party. I blinked. Wait, what? My dad finally turned to me, expression calm. We figured you'd understand, Emma. Jake's always been the face of the business. You're more behind the scenes. You've got your own path. My voice barely made it out. But I've been working here full time since I was 19. I manage the books. I run the operations. My mother placed a hand on my shoulder, soft but dismissive. Sweetheart, don't make this a thing. Jake needs this more than you. He has a future to build. And you will. You're a girl. You'll marry someone who can take care of you. There it was. The whole world in one sentence. You're a girl, not a businesswoman, not a partner, not worthy. I wanted to speak, to scream. But instead, I sat frozen in the break room while they passed out cupcakes and toasted Jake's new chapter. I watched as my brother signed documents I hadn't been allowed to see. I watched my parents beam like this was some family victory. No one noticed the way. I twisted the ring on my finger until my skin turned red later that evening. I found the legal paperwork in the office trash, shredded but not beyond reading. The business, the building, the bank account, even the retirement fund my parents had once joked would be split between us. All of it transferred to Jake. Not a word to me. Not a single conversation. No warning. It wasn't about money. It was about being erased. I walked home that night through the rain, refusing the ride Jake offered with a grin. You okay, Em? He asked, as if I'd just missed the bus, not my birthright. I got home and peeled off my wet clothes like I was shedding old skin. I stood in the shower until the water ran cold. And when I looked at myself in the mirror afterward, puffy eyes, tight jaw, shoulders hunched, I saw it clearly for the first time. I was never meant to inherit anything, not the shop, not the trust, not even their respect. They never planned for me to be anything but useful. And now that they were done using me, they left nothing, but nothing is its own kind of freedom. I didn't even take a break. The Monday after the celebration, I updated my resume and started applying. I filled out forms on company websites, wrote carefully worded cover letters, and attached reference letters I had written for myself because no one at the shop ever thought to write me. One, in every interview, I spoke of my years managing operations, payroll, vendor contracts. I was the operations lead, I'd say, for a local business, but when they asked which business, and I answered, my family's hardware store, the energy in the room would shift. Oh, one manager said, eyebrows rising. So, like, helping out? No, I clarified. Full-time. Payroll, staff scheduling, order management, vendor negotiations. He interrupted with a smile so tight it could cut glass. That's sweet, but we're looking for candidates with professional business experience. I smiled back. Even tighter. I was the business experience, but it didn't matter. My decade of work didn't come with a shiny job title or corporate stamp. To them, I was just a daughter who stocked shelves and answered phones. No LinkedIn endorsements. No glamorous branding. Just quiet labor behind a louder man's name. The hardest part wasn't the rejection. It was the condescension. One recruiter literally chuckled. Well, Emma, it's a competitive market. Maybe try entry-level admin work, build up from there. Entry-level. I had trained people who couldn't run a basic profit report. I had reorganized an inventory system with 6,000 SKUs. I had handled an IRS audit without breaking a sweat, but now I was being advised to try receptionist work and stay humble. Meanwhile, Jake was posting filtered selfies behind the register with captions like, "Boss life chose me," and "First week as CEO." Already crushing it. He hadn't crushed a spreadsheet in his life. Each photo had my parents in the background, smiling like they'd raised a prodigy. The likes and comments rolled in. Proud of you, Jake. Knew you'd make it. Your dad must be so proud. I stopped checking after a week. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I didn't stop trying. When no one would hire me, I started freelancing. I offered to help a friend with her boutique's POS system, then another with their tax prep. Word spread slowly. I created a free website, a digital portfolio. I didn't have a flashy brand, just receipts and results. I worked odd hours, skipped weekends, ate canned soup to save money. My apartment was small, but it was mine. Every dollar I made was earned without nepotism, without false promises. Just skill and quiet hustle. It wasn't glamorous. No one clapped when I came home. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was building something with my name on it, not Jake's, and that was enough to keep going. Some people break when they're pushed out. I learned to build. There was no moment of grand inspiration. Just a quiet click one night at 2 a.m. as I submitted another failed job application. I closed the tab, opened YouTube, and typed, "How to start a business." It started with free videos, then free PDFs, then online courses in finance, marketing, and operations. I devoured everything. Accounting principles, SEO optimization, inventory logistics. I took notes like a student possessed because I was. This time, I wasn't just learning to survive my father's legacy. I was building my own. I stopped calling home, stopped checking Jake's posts, stopped waiting for apologies that were never coming. Instead, I filed for a business license under my name. Emma Harper, not Harper and Son. Just me. I launched an e-commerce site with thrifted office supplies and liquidation buys. At first, I fulfilled every order from my kitchen table. My first customer bought $12 worth of planner stickers. I cried after shipping it. Not because of the money, but because it was mine. I kept the lights on doing odd consulting jobs, mostly inventory fixes and basic bookkeeping for small shops. They were unimpressed by my resume, but they couldn't argue with my results. Each client I helped added another piece to my reputation. I didn't market myself as the girl who was left behind. I positioned myself as the quiet expert in systems, the one who knew how to get operations from chaos to control. And word spread. Slowly, but surely. My discipline sharpened. I created morning routines, budgeted every dollar, reinvented my wardrobe to match the woman I was becoming. Clean lines, no apologies. By year 2, I was profitable. By year 3, I was in demand. I remember catching my reflection in a store window one afternoon, hair up, blazer crisp, phone in hand, energy calm but commanding, and thinking, they wouldn't recognize me now. And I was right. At the last family dinner I attempted, my mother blinked at me across the table. "You've changed," I smiled. Yes, she didn't mean it as a compliment, but I took it as one. Jake, of course, was still playing boss. The shop had expanded, then flopped. A second location closed in 6 months. I knew because one of my consulting clients had scooped up their shelving units in liquidation. They were underestimating me still, and that was their first mistake. They thought they'd pushed out the girl who took notes and never complained. What they really did was release a strategist with a memory like fire. I was sipping my morning coffee when I got the message. "Hey, thought you'd want to know. Things aren't great at the shop." It was from Lucas, a former floor manager who used to work with me back when I still wore the family name like a second skin. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but his words hit like a brick. Apparently, the business was sinking. Fast. Jake had expanded inventory too quickly, bought in bulk without understanding seasonal demand, fired the most experienced staff and replaced them with part-timers who didn't care. The systems I once built were dismantled, and the chaos that followed. Predictable. Suppliers were pulling out, orders delayed, customers lost. Lucas ended the message with, "It's bad, like really bad." I read it twice. Then once more, and I felt nothing. No joy. No satisfaction. Not even sadness. Just stillness. I had predicted this. Not out of malice, but from lived experience. Jake was a headline, not a leader. Charisma without competence. And my parents, they were the investors who bet on the wrong horse and never looked back. Until now. 2 days later, my phone rang. Mom, flashing across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then came Dad, then Jake, then Mom again. The fourth time, I picked up. Emma, my mother said, voice bright, brittle, fake. It's been too long. How are you, sweetheart? I waited, let the silence stretch. She hated silence. Always filled it with sugar. Eventually, she sighed. We could really use your help. There it was. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a transaction disguised as tenderness. Jake's having a hard time, she continued. You know how complicated business is? Maybe you could help him out a little? You always knew the operations better than anyone. I almost laughed. So now I mattered. Now I was capable. Now that the golden child had turned rust and the shop was bleeding out, I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the skyline I'd earned on my own. My hands were clean. My bills were paid. My name was mine again. No, I said simply. What? I'm not available, I repeated, voice steady. I have my own company now. I don't have time to fix someone else's mess. There was a pause on the other end. Not long, just long enough to register the shift in power. Then the voice turned cold. I just thought you'd care about your family. Click. I sat there, letting the weight of it settle. They didn't want me. They wanted my skills, my mind, my labor, but never my heart. And they had made that choice years ago. Power doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives in silence, wearing a clean suit and a legally binding offer. I spoke to no one. Not Lucas, not my mother, not even my reflection. Instead, I made a call to a lawyer I trusted. I told her exactly what I wanted. I want to buy a business anonymously. I don't want them to know it's me. Not now, not ever, unless I choose. We created a shell company. Nothing flashy. A short name vague enough to pass as any other small investment firm. We drafted a letter of intent, backed it with legitimate capital, and sent the first offer within 48 hours. The number? Not generous, but not insulting. Just enough to survive, just enough to look like a miracle. Without screaming charity. They bit instantly. My lawyer texted me the update. Offer accepted. They're thrilled. I stared at that message longer than I expected. Not because I doubted the outcome, but because I realized I didn't feel like celebrating. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. Within a week, we had the contract signed. Emma Harper never appeared on a single document. Only the LLC, only the representative she hired to handle logistics. To them, I was a lifeline with a logo. They signed over majority ownership without asking a single question about who was behind it. That was the most poetic part. The same people who once said, "You're not business material," had just handed me the company they built, thinking I was someone smarter, more capable, more important. And they were right, but I had always been. They just never saw it. On the day the deal closed, Jake posted a photo online, him clinking champagne glasses with my parents. The caption read, "When God sends blessings through unexpected doors." I almost choked on my tea. It wasn't. It was the daughter you dismissed, the sister you stole from the woman you once told would marry rich, instead of making her own way. I printed that photo and tucked it into my drawer, not out of spite, but as a reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't public humiliation. Sometimes it's watching them smile in celebration, completely unaware that they now work for the person they once overlooked And that was just the beginning. The front door hadn't changed. Same chipped paint. Same faded welcome mat that had never felt particularly welcoming to me. I stepped inside, heels clicking against the tile, the same floor I'd mopped as a teenager while my brother counted inventory like he was already king. Back then, I walked on eggshells. Today, I walked in power. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" I smiled. "Just let the owners know their new majority partner is here." A moment later, Jake stepped into the hallway, half smiling like he thought I was there for a nostalgic visit. "Emma?" He blinked. "Wow, what are you doing here?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking straight past him toward the conference room I once wasn't even allowed to sit in. Inside, my parents were waiting. They stood up in unison like they'd seen a ghost. "Emma, sweetheart," my mother started. "Let's not waste time," I said gently. "I'm here on business." Jake followed me in, confused. "What is this?" I opened the folder in my hand and placed 3 printed documents on the table. Copies of the ownership transfer, board decision memo, and employment restructuring plan. Each one stamped and sealed. They read in silence. My mother was the first to speak. You're the buyer?" I nodded. "Through a legal entity, yes. But why?" She whispered, "Why wouldn't you just talk to us?" I met her eyes, steady and calm. "Because talking never worked. Not when I asked to be included. Not when I was promised I'd get my time. Not when you gave everything away." Jake looked like he was swallowing glass. "You tricked us?" "No," I said simply. "I offered a deal. You accepted. I followed the rules. Something you never let me do." The room was so quiet. I could hear the clock tick behind me. "I'm not here for revenge," I continued. "I'm here to run this company cleanly, efficiently, professionally." Jake scoffed. "You think you can just waltz in and you've been demoted," I interrupted, handing him a fresh job description. "You'll now report to operations under a 90-day performance review." His jaw locked. "You can't be serious." "I'm not angry, Jake," I said, voice like glass. "I'm focused." I turned to my parents. "You both will receive a severance package. Generous, but standard. HR will walk you through it. You'll no longer be involved in day-to-day operations." My father, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "We're your parents." "I know," I said softly. "That's why I'm not doing worse." The words hung there, suspended in tension. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I wasn't begging for understanding like I used to. I was leading. "I don't need applause." "I don't need apologies," I said as I stood. "I just need space to build the kind of company I would have created from the beginning. If you'd only let me." They didn't follow me as I walked out. No one begged. No one offered excuses. It was done. The girl who once asked for permission had just delivered consequences. They came unannounced. My assistant knocked on the glass, hesitant. "Your parents are here? They asked to speak with you privately." I nodded once. "Send them in." They entered slowly, looking more like strangers than the people who once decided my future without asking me. My mother clutched her purse like it was armor. My father looked around the office, sleek, modern. Mine, with an expression I couldn't quite place. "Emma," my mother started. "We wanted to clear the air." I gestured toward the chairs across from my desk. "You have 5 minutes," she sat. My father stayed standing. What you did, it wasn't necessary," he said. I tilted my head. "You mean buying the business? Saving it from collapse? Or making sure you're no longer in charge of it?" He winced. There were better ways. "For who?" Silence. My mother leaned forward. "Emma, we raised you better than this. This vindictive streak. It's not who you are." I met her eyes, calm. "You're right. It's not who I was." She blinked. "What happened to you?" "You," I said. You happened to me. The words didn't rise. They fell like stones in still water. My voice didn't waver. It didn't need to. My calmness did the cutting now. We made mistakes, sure, my father said. But we're family. That has to count for something. I folded my hands. When did it ever count for me? My mother tried again. Jake was struggling. We thought giving him the business was the best way to help. And what was I? I asked, the insurance policy? The spare. The silent worker who didn't need help because she wouldn't complain. They didn't respond. I stood, walking slowly toward the window behind me. You didn't just give him the business. You erased me from it. I was a footnote in my own family. That's not fair, my father muttered. No, I said, turning to face them. What wasn't fair was giving my inheritance to someone who never showed up to work on time. What wasn't fair was telling me for 20 years that my time would come. Then giving mine away. They looked small now. Not because I had grown bigger, but because they had shrunk in the light of accountability. We're not asking for much. My mother whispered, just to be a part of things again. I walked back to my desk and sat. You said this was business, I reminded them. So let's keep it that way. Her mouth opened, then closed again. If you want to invest, I continued, you can schedule a meeting through my assistant. But family loyalty isn't accepted as currency here. My father's face hardened. So that's it. After everything we did for you, I gave a small smile. You didn't do it for me. You did it for who you thought I was, the girl who'd stay small, stay quiet, stay grateful for scraps. They stood together now, flustered. We'll always love you, Emma, my mother said at the door. I nodded. Then you'll understand when I say I love myself more. She hesitated. You'll regret this. I leaned back in my chair. I used to regret being invisible. This is clarity. They left without another word, and I sat in stillness, not broken, not bitter, just finally free. The first thing I did was unlock the back door, not the literal one, though that, too, had long been reserved for managers and family, but the metaphorical one. The door for people who had once been shut out, tucked down to, overlooked. I called in Monica, the floor manager who had worked at the company for 15 years before Jake. Fired her for not being a team player. She cried in my office. Not out of sadness, but because I asked her how she would run things differently. I rehired Daniel, the delivery driver who had memorized every client's preferences, but was let go after speaking up about inventory errors. I brought back Sarah from customer service, who used to stay late to fix Jake's mistakes, only to be blamed for his oversights, one by one. I rebuilt the team that had been discarded, and something magical happened. The business started breathing again. No more high turnover. No more frantic phone calls from angry clients. The inbox, once flooded with complaints, began to fill with thank you messages. Clients who had left came back, quietly, curiously. They noticed the difference before I ever had to advertise it, because this time we weren't just running a business. We were running it right. I implemented systems. Simple, clear, human. Weekly team meetings that started with gratitude. Profit sharing for long-time employees. Anonymous suggestion boxes, though after a while, people stopped needing to be anonymous. They felt safe enough to speak up. The books balanced within 6 months. We were in the black by the end of the first quarter, but none of that meant as much. To me as the day one of our newest hires, a young woman, fresh out of community college, stopped by my office door and said, I've never had a boss who made me feel like I matter before. That's when I knew we were no longer just a company. We were a culture, and it was one built on the very traits my parents once considered weaknesses. Empathy, intuition, grace under pressure. I was doing more than just cleaning up the mess. I was rewriting the blueprint, Jake's name was still technically on some of the original paperwork, a relic of a past that clung to the walls. But in every meaningful way, his legacy had been overwritten. He still worked there. Quiet now. He kept his head down, avoided my gaze. I had given him a desk near the stockroom. He clocked in and out like everyone else. I didn't humiliate him. I didn't need to. Watching the company thrive without his influence was humiliation enough. My parents stopped visiting. I didn't send them updates. They were welcome to read the press releases like everyone else. When we were featured in a local magazine for Best Business Turnaround of the Year, I placed a copy in the break room. I didn't frame it in my office. I didn't need to see my face on a wall to know what I'd done, because I saw it every day in the posture of my team, in the smiles of returning customers, in the confidence in my own reflection. They say redemption is about proving others wrong. But for me, it was about proving myself right, about who I'd always known I was underneath the silence. Beneath the years of invisibility, I wasn't born a boss, but I became one the moment I stopped waiting for permission. And that was the final piece of the transformation. I didn't need to be the golden child. I just needed to be mine. The morning was quiet. Too quiet, almost. No clatter of rushed footsteps, no raised voices behind office doors, no sighs of frustration coming from the floor below. Just stillness. And me, I stood alone in the office that used to belong to my brother. His nameplate was gone. The desk was clean. The shelves, once cluttered with meaningless trophies and ego-stuffed memorabilia, were empty. It was finally mine, not because someone gave it to me, but because I built something worth owning. From the window, I watched as Jake carried his last box to the parking lot. My parents were already gone. They hadn't stayed long. No words, no hugs, no last-minute attempts at reconciliation, just the sound of car doors closing, engines starting, and then silence. And yet I felt no rage. No twisted satisfaction. No thrill of I showed them, because the truth was, I hadn't won anything from them. I'd simply stopped losing to them. It wasn't revenge. It was recognition, not theirs, but my own. For years, I believed I had to earn their love by staying silent, by making myself small, by waiting for my turn. But that day, watching them drive off, watching their absence fill the space they once dominated, I realized something simple, almost laughable in its clarity. I had never been invisible. They just refused to see me. And now I wasn't asking. I walked through the building slowly, touching everything I used to be told not to. The meeting room table I once served coffee around. The front counter where I stood quietly while Jake introduced himself as the future. The storage room I was sent to during important meetings. All of it was mine now. I passed employees who smiled at me, not out of fear, but trust. And when I reached the front door, I turned the sign from closed to open, not because we were starting business for the day, but because I was finally open to my future, to my voice, to a life where I didn't shrink to fit anyone's shadow. I went back upstairs, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat at my new desk. For a long time, I just stared at the name etched into the glass door. Emma Reyes, managing director, not daughter. Not little sister. Not the one who was too quiet or not cutthroat. Enough. Managing, directing, leading. I thought about all the things I could say to them. All the speeches I'd practiced in my head over the years. All the moments where I imagined them begging for forgiveness, admitting they were wrong, but none of it mattered anymore because I understood now. Closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your awakening. I wasn't angry. I was awake. Awake to who I was and who they chose not to be. Awake to the power of letting go. Not for peace, but for clarity. And awake to this one truth I would carry with me forever. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself they once ignored. You owe yourself the version. You were always becoming that, so I leaned back in my chair and smiled because this is the beginning.